My name is Martin Emmer. I'm a professor for Media and Communication Studies at Freie Universität Berlin, and I have a research focus on digital media use. So I'm interested in what are people doing when they're using digital mobile media, particularly when it's about information, political communication, and so on. So that's my research focus, and that's why I'm so keen on researching how people are communicating mostly by use of these digital mobile media, which are very important in countries like the Gambia, in order to learn whether there might be differences in media use and communication in countries like the Gambia and Western countries. And from a political communication perspective, I'm interested in how propaganda is affecting people, and that's the final aim of our project. How can we counter this propaganda narratives that are in many countries in the region at the moment destabilizing large regions? A narrative is information that is presented in a way that it makes sense to people. So a storyline. And that is something that we experience very strongly in propaganda communication here in this region and in many regions where destabilization is going on. We do not know very much about communication in this region. That is the cause of a lot of conflicts in the region, and when parties, ethnicities, for example, are in conflict, then certain narratives that are using hate speech to motivate people against each other become a problem, and a lot of even violent conflict has its causes in such roots, and communication is the main medium that is leading from social conflict in the end to violent outbreaks. And that is something where, that is the point where we want to intervene in this project, identify communication problems and empower people to deal with them by themselves, and not as we do it mostly today, only in the end when we have civil war, send UN troops in. The conflicts we have been talking about, social conflicts, even in small areas, are generally a problem for development, because people never feel safe, and when people do not feel safe, nobody really has a motivation to make large investments, because you always have to be aware to be quickly up and away. So security is a basis for development, and security has to do with security forces. You need police, you need presence of state and government in an area, but it has also to do with communication. But because we see a lot of areas where there would be some state structures, but there still is mistrust of the population in even local security forces, because they are seen as corrupt or whatever, because they're violent themselves. So trust building is always the core of approaching social conflicts, and that's a point where our communication approach and security is very strongly interwoven. So we need, for example, for doing our project, we need support from security forces and actors in the field, but on the other hand side, security forces are kind of an object in our research, because they have to play their role in order to be part of peace building in the region. We need a comprehensive approach, and that's what we're doing here. We are trying to convince people of the importance of this communication layer in this conflict dynamics. But we're not just focusing on communication to solve these problems, but we try to involve all actors from all levels of society, domestic actors, local actors, but also international players, development organizations, international organizations, in order to secure the effect of such an intervention we are planning. Civil society is, I think, particularly in these conflict dynamics, the most underestimated player. They're often just victims of something, of violence, receivers of aid, but actually they could be the starting point of solving problems, because these are the people who are living in these regions. They need security and they have a lot of resources to produce security themselves. And I think we should acknowledge that and involve them as strongly as possible in all attempts of peace building. Particularly when it comes to digital media, we know that people themselves, every individual, can contribute a lot, and they do contribute a lot, and that's a problem, contributing very often unwillingly to deliver propaganda postings. So that's all our reasons why we have to focus very strongly on civil society, particularly on youth and women. Traditional leaders and imams are a very important group in our study, and if they're participating in such a narrative management system where we are giving people the skills to understand deceiving propaganda, to understand how they best could distribute checked information, and this is supported by these stakeholders, these important social stakeholders, then they may contribute a lot to the success of this project. The social component of this project is the most important. So knowledge, skills, empowerment, participation. Still, there is some material component needed. We build up an easy to use, cheap, digital, robust, resilient digital server infrastructure that can be used openly by all people participating in the project for storing, exchanging information as a place where people can discuss issues and topics that are relevant for them, and build an information environment that is carried by people themselves from the region, by local stakeholders, journalists, but also local stakeholders like chiefs, international or security organizations, and just ordinary citizen journalists. They all will have access to this information hub as a source, but also for getting information from this hub. And thus we try to build up a social and technical material information environment that is as resilient as possible against attacks of disinformation, hate and destabilization from outside. The biggest asset of this workshop is that we bring together people from all of these different stakeholder groups we'll have in the project: security forces, local administration people, NGO people, journalists, and seeing their different perspectives on this problem we are dealing with. That will be, I'm quite sure that will be very interesting, and I'm hoping I'll learn a lot, which will then inspire my research in the upcoming project, and maybe I will develop some hypothesis tomorrow for what we are researching in the next 3 years.